dogs by my uncle's house, tearing down the street. A streak of wild legs and open mouths, in love with their lives and their speed. I can't believe the joy that poured out of a mangy and lean, weaving between parked cars and people, taking turns in the lead. We used to be that free. Found a photograph of the four of us, New York, 2 a.m. Drove 3 hours just for the record shop, lost in the punk rock bins. I can't believe the joy that poured out of us when we were 19. Now we don't speak. It gets harder to call with every year in between. We used to be that free. How long has it been since you felt the cheap thrill of night air on your skin? My heart's a stray dog calling out for his brothers to come run along.
Hrishikesh Hirway performing Stray Dogs live for World Cafe. I'm Raina Douris. Hrishikesh is my guest today. He has a new album called The Last Hour of Light. Welcome back to the World Cafe.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Congratulations on the new album.
Thank you.
Sam Beam of Iron and Wine sings on that song, on the album version. His involvement in the song started way earlier than that, though. Why did you originally reach out to Sam?
I reached out to him because I was going to be doing a songwriting residency for a week, and it was going to be in Texas at a recording studio slash artist retreat in Texas, where I had first met Sam. We had done a taping for my podcast, Song Exploder, there, and I had this goal of trying to write something, maybe write a new song every day, which would have been a new thing for me. So I started to get a little nervous about being able to pull that off. I was just coming off of a very long period of writer's block, 10 years of writer's block. And so I was really worried that I would get there and then suddenly it would pop up again. I would have, another bout, and I would squander this opportunity. So I started to reach out to some friends to ask them for songwriting prompts that I could turn to if I needed to just sort of like get the juices flowing. If for some reason one of my own ideas wasn't working out and I just wanted to shift my attention. And he sent me a few, and one of them was the prompt that led to this song. He had sent me the phrase, "Describe a street that you grew up on from the point of view of a stray dog."
Ooh.
Which was so evocative and exciting that I started writing actually immediately. Look, the phrase "stray dogs" jumped out, and it made me think of the first time I ever saw stray dogs, which was in India when I was a kid, when I was visiting my parents' families. That led me from that memory to another memory of when I was a teenager, and all these feelings that I had gotten from seeing those stray dogs, a memory that I had kind of forgotten about. But the stray dogs were so carefree and so full of joy, and they ignored the people around them. They just had their own life and their own world and their own community. And remembering the feeling that gave me also reminded me of how my friends and I used to be.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about all these different things that you lose when you get older. The funny thing was that I ended up writing that song so quickly after he sent me that prompt that I was done with it before I actually got to the songwriting residency.
So then you had to start all over.
Yeah, so it didn't really help.
Memory is a theme that runs throughout the album. Was that something that you went in with the intention to write about, or did that reveal itself to you as you were working on it?
It wasn't an intent at the outset. It just happened because I think of the moment that I'm in my life, in middle age and in the wake of my mom's passing. And after losing her, I started to realize how fragile my memories really were. I'm somebody who I kind of prided myself on my memory for the first 40 years of my life. I thought that I had a really strong memory, but then suddenly when that's the only thing that you have to recall someone, you start to notice just how unreliable it is and how permeable it is and how fragile it is. And that started to change not just my relationship to my own memories, but also my relationship to time. I find myself spending more and more time in my memories and kind of thinking about, I guess maybe I'm looking back a lot more than I'm looking forward, which is a change in my life.
Really? Are you? You don't you're not that old.
Well, I mean, it's funny. Maybe everybody always feels this way, but I could have never imagined my life at this age earlier in my life. I'm closer to 50, and that is, I can't even imagine that I would ever be that age. Like I can't associate that number with my sense of who I am. Of course, here I am. I'm like, well, what does that mean? What am I supposed to have accomplished by this point? What is still left to do? And, how much respect do I have for the idea of the dreams that I used to have and their possibility of still coming true?
Yeah. My guest is Hrishikesh Hirway. His new album is called In the Last Hour of Light. You said a lot in there that we're going to come back and touch on a little bit later. But I want to talk about another job of yours quickly before we get back to the new album. You started the podcast Song Exploder in 2014, where you have artists dissect their songs and explain how they work. What was the original impetus behind that? Why did you want to give people insight into the creative process and into songwriting?
I guess I started to imagine a show that would fulfill a need that I had as an artist. I was looking for wisdom and experience from artists that I admired. When I started Song Exploder, I'd been a musician for over a decade. And I would listen to interviews and read articles featuring musicians that I really admired. And it always felt like they sort of lived a mile above the work. They talked about the grand concepts or big biographical elements, but it wasn't what I was looking for. I wanted to know, how did they solve what I understood to be the sort of day-to-day obstacles and technical challenges, creative challenges of just going from having nothing to having a song.
Yeah.
I knew that problem solving for myself took on all kinds of different forms, and it was different for each song. So I wanted to start a show where people could talk about that, as well as be a format where listeners could hear what's happening within the musical elements within a song. because I also knew from my own experience how much work and how much thought goes into those individual pieces without ever knowing if the people who are hearing the final song will be able to pick those things out or notice them or understand the intention that you had in that arrangement or in that mix or in that choice of instrument. So really, it was just a matter of trying to create a show that I wanted to hear myself.
Yeah. So now you're sitting on the other side of that conversation as the interviewed person. Is there anything that you learned from doing interviews with artists that you're able to take to make you a better interview subject?
You'd asked before if I had had any kind of intention at the outset
Yeah.
for the album. I didn't have one in terms of a theme around the content, but I did know, and I think this was very influenced by making Song Exploder, that I wanted to make songs that were very personal. The episodes that I'd made of the podcast that have stayed with me the most have not been necessarily the ones with the most famous artists, although those are exciting, but the ones where the song and the experience around the song and the inspiration behind it have been the most personal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that will necessarily turn into me being a better interview subject.
You're doing great so far.
But at least then I could have something to talk about when it came to talk about the songs that was more than just, I thought this was cool.
Right. Yeah. My guest is Hrishikesh Hirway. His new album is called In the Last Hour of Light. It's World Cafe. Here is Big Sky, live for World Cafe.
Big sky above us, gold in the tree. If I'm without you, what would I be? See who I've been to let you in. I used to be a walking ghost and didn't know. Pull me in and never let me go. Big sky above us, hand in your hand. I have been changed in ways I don't understand.
Thank you so much.
There's a fault line underneath us. Saw it on the news. It's been quiet all these years, but I know what it could do. When I look at you, when I look at you, little fractures in between us, let some darkness through. There's a risk that we both live with, but it's easy to. When I look at you, 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 brush the hair back from your face. Every morning when the light breaks and I'm coming to, in the wake of near disaster, I know what I could lose. When I look at you, 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 when I look at you.
Thank you so much.
Hrishikesh Hirway's new album is called In the Last Hour of Light. You just heard him live for World Cafe. You started making music yourself in 1999 as the 1 AM radio, but it's been 15 years, I think, since your last full-length album. Maybe this is where we get into some writer's block stuff, but I mean, obviously you were busy with your shows. You've also done composing for other projects. What was behind that long break between records?
In 2011, when I put out my fourth album as the 1 AM radio, I started to feel like the music career that I had was not living up to what I thought it would be. And I just couldn't see a path to get to where I wanted. I really had so many expectations around that album. And I thought, I think with every album, you hope that you're going to get somewhere new. And it's not to say nothing happened there, but it was incremental and not exponential.
Sure.
And I started to tell myself this story that, like, if it hadn't happened at this point for me, like, was it really realistic that it would ever happen, And maybe I was just fooling myself. And maybe this dream that I had been working towards for, over a decade was a mistake, that I had just deluded myself into thinking that this could be something that was right for me. It really got in my head.
Right. Would you sit down and try to write and you couldn't do it?
It's more like I would start to write and I would immediately feel like whatever my idea was only as good as what I'd done before. And what I'd done before hadn't led to what I'd dreamt of.
Right.
And so, basically everything felt like a failure before it even had the chance to exist. Every song felt like a bad one.
Was that a completely new feeling for you? Are you someone who's always been self-critical?
I guess I have always been self-critical, but I think I used to think that it was really an advantage, that it meant that I was working really hard. In the past, my drive to make music was so strong that I was able to use that self-criticism in a way that felt like I was like, okay, I'm sharpening the edges, I'm honing my skills.
Right.
But that was the first time where it felt like, yeah, the criticism outweighed everything else.
And so then you end up making this show about people writing songs. Did doing that inspire you to write, or did it make the process seem even more difficult?
Eventually it did inspire me to write, but not until after I had experienced the other version of it. I really, for many years, felt like that self-criticism was exacerbated by the show, because I would be talking to incredibly successful musicians, artists that I admired so much, about some of their biggest songs, and then I would maybe in a moment go back and try and write something, and immediately that idea that like, what I'm doing isn't as good. Forget about like isn't as good in some abstract way. He was a very concrete thing, to be up against in a, not like I was up against it, but just they were back to back in my life, and I would feel like, who am I kidding? What am I trying to do here? And I really became focused on the idea of like what use I was, like what value I had in the world, or what I might be able to contribute. And I had thought that like it was music. I thought it was my own songs, and but the podcast had become more popular than my songs had been. I found it had inadvertently turned into this career, and so I thought, well, maybe that means that I shouldn't be making music.
Right. It's almost like that gilded cage thing, where it's like, well, this thing is really great. How did you get out of that headspace? Was there a moment, or was there an event, or did it just kind of gradually change?
There was actually a very specific event. I have this photo actually, and I sometimes think about how like it's so rare to have a photograph of the moment that you have a life-changing event, but it is. There's a photo I have on my phone of my friend Jenny Owen Youngs, who's a fantastic singer and songwriter. At my house, we were working on a song together. She had asked me to co-write a song with her. She had no idea that I was at that point years deep into writer's block. I had always really kind of worked more or less on my own.
Mm.
I said yes after some, internal debate about whether or not I was actually going to be able to contribute anything at all. But it ended up being that we really did collaborate in a really wonderful way. And it made me feel like this thing that I thought was lost wasn't actually lost.
This is your first full-length album that you've released under your own name. I know you had an EP in 2022 that was under your own name, but this is the first full-length one. Why was it time to use your own name to release a full record?
I don't know that there's a great reason, honestly, because the 1AM radio was my project and it felt like it was a part of me. I mean, not a great creative reason, I guess, because I still feel very attached to that music. It's not like the music is so different, but my life is so different.
Mm.
And there's a part of it where, you just feel like you want to mark that change. Another part of it was the reason why I had started using the name The 1AM Radio was a little bit complicated at the beginning. I'd played a few shows under my own name as Hrishikesh Hirway, and then one time I was like, maybe that's too much, and I just went by Hrishikesh on a flyer, But I remember a couple times, this was when I was still in college. This was in 1999. I remember a couple of people had asked me about my music, and someone said, "What kind of music do you play?" And I said, "Oh, it's like indie, kind of like indie rock, indie folk." And they were like, Hindi rock?
Oh,
I was like, no, oh, no. And I remember putting up a flyer one time, and and it had my name when I just had Hrishikesh on it. And they were like, and someone asked if it was sort of like Bollywood inspired or any, and I was like, no, it's like Nick Drake and Elliott Smith inspired, or I don't know. It just felt like I had direct experience of people, because of my name, having some kind of preconception about
Right.
what the music might be. And if they have that preconception, maybe that preconception might prevent them from checking it out. So what if I use a moniker? And I came up with all kinds of reasons for why that was actually a good thing. Like this is a way to introduce some idea into the music, having a title that wasn't just the arbitrary name that my parents gave me before they knew who I was.
Yeah.
This was a name that I chose. And also, like, look at all these artists who I love, like Smog and Cat Power, who were solo artists with monikers. And so I did that for a really long time. But then when it came time to make music again, one of the things that I was excited about was the possibility that the world is different. That 20 plus years later, I could put my name on something and maybe people would just take it at face value or something like that. So it was a little bit of an act of optimism.
Yeah. Well, we're going to hear another song from that album that you put your name on. It's called Home Movies. But before we hear it, could you tell us what this song is about?
Yeah. Home Movies is a song about my late father-in-law, whom I never met. He passed away just a couple of weeks before I met my wife, Lindsay. And they had a complicated relationship. He had kind of a tragic life. And it's been, difficult at times to see how she has related to his memory. And my only relationship with him is through her memory. Really, like I have a secondhand relationship to him, but then I also feel like I have all this firsthand experience as well through the things that he's left behind, including his daughter, including, Lindsay's family gave me his old guitar, an old Gibson that he used to play, and a mandolin. And every time I pick them up, of course, I think of him. And I think about, that relationship, like what that might have been and what the relationship is. It feels like a real relationship, though we never met.
Yeah. What was your wife's reaction when she heard this song for the first time?
I think she was really moved. It's called Home Movies, and it was partly inspired also just by the fact that Lindsay's family found these old home movies from her childhood, and Lindsay went and digitized them. Mm-hmm. And so for the first time, I was able to actually not just see a photograph of her dad, but actually like hear his voice and see the two of them interacting. And before things got more complicated and got more tragic in his story, there are these moments, these like childhood moments between her and her dad that were so beautiful. And again, I felt like I got a new layer of insight into him. And so all of that informed this song.
Will you play it for us? Hrishikesh Hirway, Home Movies, live for World Cafe.
Thank you.
Off screen, the crack in the base of the bird figurine, the brass belt buckle, the trouble when I sleep, your love of the desert and the secrets that I keep, all the love you gave, you left behind, all the hurt still left to find. Haunted stand just like you used to, one leg off the ground, and sit a little easier when there's no one else around. I put new strings on your dusty mandolin. I'm surrounded by what's left of the person you had been. Haunted, haunted. The shadow in the photo, the voice off screen. In a home movie, I keep watching on repeat, 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 watching on repeat.
Home Movies, performed live by Hrishikesh Hirway on World Cafe. I'm Raina Douris, talking to Hrishikesh about his new album, In the Last Hour of Light, today. It's so interesting because you talk about how before these songs started coming together for you, you had writer's block. You were worried that these songs you wrote weren't going to live up to the standards you have. And then on the other end, you choose this producer, Phil Weinrobe, who is like, come on in, we're going to do it live in front of all these musicians. That feels like a big contrast. Why was he the right person for this?
Yeah, it ended up being, I really went entirely in the opposite direction, in a way that I think was ultimately a great choice. But during the weeks when we were figuring this out, it felt like a terrifying choice, because his way of working really, it really pushed on the button of my self-criticism. You know, the way that Phil works, capturing stuff live, and in this way, he had this philosophy where being perfect wasn't the goal, and in fact, maybe it was actually even the opposite of the goal.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, this idea of like music feeling alive and feeling electric, it's sort of, it's still something, you know, you judge whether it's good, and, you know, did you get it right, and is that performance right? But whether the performance is good is not whether the performance is accurate, you know, to the
Right.
notes, or did everybody stay in time, or like, if anybody did a weird thing, like, oh, then you have to throw that out, or you have to go re-record that. And I had spent so long in the years before I had writer's block, you know, where I thought that self-criticism was an advantage, because I would so meticulously fine-tune things and re-record things and try and quote unquote get it right. So when he proposed this way of working, I was absolutely scared out of my mind.
Yeah.
And I tried very hard to be like, is there some other way that we can do this? And he was like, not if you're going to work with me. And so for a while I was like, maybe this is a terrible choice. And as I talked about it and thought about it, I talked about it with you know, people who know me, and they were like, actually, I think this is the perfect choice for you. And I think they were right, because one of the things I also understood was that with music, you know, you have absolutely no control as to how it's going to be received, or what effect it might have in the world, or what effect it might, you know, what you might get back in terms of professionally or something like that. There's just no way of knowing. And I went back into making music with the idea that I was going to abandon those kinds of expectations, the expectations that had gotten me in so much trouble before. And if that's the case, then what am I doing this for? I'm doing this for myself. And but what does that really mean? I'm hoping to, I wanted to be a more actualized version of myself at the end. I just wanted to grow from the experience. That was the one thing that I felt like I could control. And by working with someone who was going to push against everything that I was comfortable with, make me uncomfortable, but with the idea that actually there's a different way to judge music and there's a different way to judge the experience than everything I had kind of lived with, was going to force me to have to grow. Yeah. It was going to force me to change my perspective. So it wasn't an explicit decision. Even when we first started talking, I reached out to him just because I loved records that he'd made, but I had no idea how he had actually gone about making them.
Well, and earlier we talked about as you get older, feeling like you want to hold on to memories. And this kind of ties into what you're talking about, because as I get older, I feel like there is this almost desire that I wish I could control time a little bit more. I wish I could slow it down. I wish I could hold on to things like that. Is that something that you find relatable?
Absolutely. I mean, that's why the album is called In the Last Hour of Light.
Yeah.
Because I was looking for a title that had all of those feelings in it, where I know that things haven't ended yet, but I'm also very aware of the limited amount of time that exists.
My guest today on World Cafe is Hrishikesh Hirway. His new album is called In the Last Hour of Light. So we've talked about memory quite a bit throughout this interview. The song Charlie, short for Charlotte, is another kind of memory, almost like a memory of maybe an alternate timeline. It's something I don't think I've ever heard someone write a song about before. And before we hear you play it, could you talk a little bit about writing this song?
Yeah. When I first met my wife, and things were starting to feel like they were getting serious, I told Lindsay that I don't think that I want to have kids. I don't know if this is going to be an issue for you. We were both in our 20s and probably ill-equipped to really have this conversation, but I wanted to just get that out in the open. And she said that was fine with her. And it was fine for a long time. And when you decide that you're not going to have kids, you have to kind of dig your heels in a way, for a long time, because so many people will ask you when you get married, and then right after you get married, and you give your reasons and people won't even buy the reasons. They'll say there's a way they're going to say something. It'll be like, oh, actually now we are going to have kids. Thanks. That. So we got so practiced with the arguments for why we weren't going to have kids, that I not only took it as a default position, I kind of was very stubborn about it, because I felt like you really had to have that kind of strength of will to stick to that decision in the face of all this pressure. But now I'm in my 40s, 20 years later, and the consequences of that decision are real, and forever. We know at this point we're not going to have kids. That's still going to be true for the rest of our lives. And I've met so many incredible kids, my friends and my sister as kids, and I have real relationships with them that I love, and I value those relationships. And I can't help but think about the idea that maybe we made the wrong decision. It's not a thought that you can really entertain too much. And it was one that we hadn't really allowed ourselves to entertain because of that stubbornness, because of the dint of the argument that we had to make. But now, once that question has been settled in our minds, with this song, I sort of let myself do this thing that I kind of, shy away from sometimes, which is actually imagine what it would be like and think about all the ways it would be beautiful, instead of having to argue against why our decision was right. You're like, well, what have I actually given up? What have I lost? And so this is a song that I'm singing to the daughter that we won't have.
It's a really beautiful song.
Thanks.
We're going to hear you perform it now. Here's Hrishikesh Hirway, Charlie, short for Charlotte, live for World Cafe.
I can picture you running, hair swept past your face. A summer day in slow motion, a memory misplaced. People pull us aside to talk about your eyes. The color's hard to describe. They're half your mom's and mine. Try to understand. This is the only chance I've got. The life we could have had, I can still hold it in my thoughts. Images I can't forget. In between hope and regret, there's you. My mother wanted to meet you. She'd whisper it to me. I keep you side by side now. What was and what won't be. I always liked the name Charlotte, Charlie to your friends. I stay too long in the daydream. I know how it ends. Try to understand. This is the only chance I've got. The life we could have had, I can still hold it in my thoughts. Images I can't forget. In between hope and regret, there's you.
Thank you so much.
Out on Catalina, there's 100 buffalo pending by the ocean, the only home they'll know. Do they dream the Great Plains as they breathe in the salt air? Can you miss the place you're meant to be if you were never there? Does it go on and on and on? What if this goes on and on and on? myself staring into nothing much at all. Past the fairground, the graveyard, the empty shopping mall. And I drove till the road ended in the county beach. Felt the distance between me and everything that's out of reach. Does it go on and on and on? What if this goes on and on and on? On a roller coaster ride, up against the open sky. What if this goes on and on and on? What if this goes on and on and on? What if this goes on and on and on? What if this goes on and on and on? What if this goes on and on and on? What if this goes on and on and on?
Thank you so much.
Hrishikesh Hirway, live for World Cafe. His new album is called In the Last Hour of Light. He's been my guest today. Hrishikesh, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Raina Douris, back in a moment with more World Cafe.